Now, we've been covering a lot of ground in this module. We've been talking about white spirits and whiskeys. Now we're going to move on to one of the most exciting categories of all, and that is brandy. Brandy are all of those wonderful spirits that are made from fruits, grapes, pears, apples, made into wine and then distilled into brandy. Now, this category is so large, we'd love to be able to cover each of these categories, like Pisco, like Brandy de Jerez, like Eau de Vie. We'd love to cover all of these in depth. We just don't have the time, unfortunately, but all of that information is located in your workbook. But in the meantime, we're going to be looking at the three great demarcated regions of brandy for France: Calvados, Cognac, and Armagnac. The word brandy, where does that come from? Brandewijn, the Dutch term for burnt wine. And when you think about it, here's our little demonstration still for a shot. When you think about our distillation process, what is it other than boiling? It's heating. So the wine, and for brandy, it's boiling wine. So that brandy, that wine is burnt. Even though Armagnac preceded Cognac by 200 years, Armagnac production down in Gascony was really happening, but with a pretty good clip in the 13 and 1400s. Cognac, however, didn't really get up to speed till the 1600s. And by 1640, it was pretty clear that what they were doing in Cognac was of particular value. We have to credit the British with their understanding, their innate understanding and ardor for beverage alcohol. When this happened with port, this happened with whiskey, this happened with Cognac. The British understood quality products, and not only would they support it with their commerce, but they would support it with their investment. And Cognac really, really hit stride in the 1600s, the late 1600s, early 1700s, when Great Britain and commercial entrepreneurs from Britain got involved because they saw the potential of no longer having a neighborhood mom and pop industry, a cottage industry along the west coast of France, but an industry that could have true worldwide implications. Cognac, the three main cities that really make this brand, this category work, are the cities of Cognac, Jarnac, and Séguenzac. La Rochelle is really important because La Rochelle was a port that was hugely successful and busy with the commercial transfer of a lot of the commodities goods that Western France and Central France were exporting to the rest, to Great Britain, to Northern Africa, where they're starting to colonize, and also to Portugal and Spain. And those commodities were salt, salted fish, a lot of salted cod, and so, but also wine. And so they were shipping wine and then eventually brandy to England. And the river that is really the key is the Charente. And the Charente just goes right through the whole heart of Cognac. And it really kind of dissects, it really defines the regions. And there are 6 demarcated regions. And they kind of fan out. It's almost like I think of it as a bullseye. And the Grand Champagne is the bullseye itself. Grand Champagne is the most important because that's the Bentley. That's the silver cloud of all those 6 regions. Grand Champagne is an interesting region because the soil is very, very similar to the Champagne region that's 90 miles northeast of Paris for Champagne. Now, we should also, Doug and I also want to make clear that this has nothing to do with the Champagne region, obviously. It's just a similarity, just a referral back to the similarity in the soil type. Very calcareous soil that's very, very dusty. Grand Champagne itself has nice topography. There's lots of hills, and so the grapes that are grown are often on sloping sides to the south that face, so they get lots of good sunlight. Cognacs that are labeled as Grand Champagne, and we may have a few in here, the ones that are labeled as Grand Champagne, of course, must be 100%. Anything that is labeled as Grand Champagne or any of the other from the other demarcated districts must be 100% from that region. So if it says Petit Champagne, must be 100%. It's not like Cabernet, say, with wine, or varietal, where in California it has to be 75%. If it says Grand Champagne or one of the other regions on the label, it must be 100% for that. An exception is Fine Champagne. And Fine Champagne must be a combination of Petit Champagne, which is kind of like the number 2 region, and at least 50% of Grand Champagne. While Grand Champagne cognacs are extremely long-lived and very, very deep, very multi-layered, Petit Champagne is all of those things, but just at a notch below that. So these are the 2 real key regions that you absolutely should be aware of. These are great talking points for your people who come in and say, yeah, you know, what do you have in cognac that I like? They're really good talking points. Our next region, which is the little amoeba-shaped region up to the, it's the kind of the topaz-colored region that is to the northwest of Grand Champagne and Petit Champagne, is Borderies. Doug and I particularly like the Borderies cognacs because they have a very nutty, distinctive, almost a very intensely dried fruit taste, whereas the cognacs from Grand Champagne and Petit Champagne are deep and very multi-layered. Borderies are a little bit more approachable, and they're actually really lovely. But you don't find too many of them because the problem is blending. Blending is the key in Bordeaux, so you don't find too many Borderies labeled cognacs. And I wish there were more. There are only a handful, unfortunately. Also, Borderies is a very small area. The area is devoted over to vines in Grand Champagne, about 32,000 acres, 33,000. Petit Champagne is nearly 40,000, about 39,500. But in the Borderies, I mean, it's only 9,900 acres. So it's not very much in comparison to the other 2 biggies. But there's another emerging region called Framboise. The Trois Bois are Framboise, Bonbois, and Bois Ordinaire. Though Bois Ordinaire, I must tell you, that name has now been changed over to Bois Terroir. Framboise is really making a real play now. And there are more and more cognacs coming, and this is something that's emerging. So this is something that you guys, being cutting-edge people, should know about. Yes, Grand Champagne, Petit Champagne, Borderies, a lot of consumers are aware of those now. But a real emerging area that it would be good to be cutting edge on is being hip to the fact that there are more and more Framboises coming into the marketplace now that are 100% Framboise. And they are not as deep, they are not as illustrious, they're not as lush as the cognacs from Grand Champagne, Petit Champagne, or Borderies. They're more approachable. And in a sense, the Framboise people are telling me now that they're couching them as the more contemporary, not quite as old-fashioned as the cognacs that are from the traditional big 3 regions. Now, the big 4 companies that really come into play, of course, are Hennessy, which is by far and away the largest, Courvoisier, Martell, and Remy Martin. Those are the big 4. Those are the big 4 companies that have the money, the muscle, and the marketing power to continue making cognac the truly phenomenon that it is within the spirits category. Let's talk about grape types. So we've talked about marketing, we've talked about worldwide presence, we've talked about the 6 regions. Let's go into a little bit of production now. Grape types, basically, before the 1870s, when, of course, what happened in the 1870s and early 1880s? Phylloxera. The Phylloxera vistastrix louse went through the vineyards of Europe and just decimated them. And of course, since cognac is made from wine, that louse decimated the vineyards of the Charente area, the Cognac area as well. Before that time, the real staple grape of Cognac was Fol Blanche. And there's a little bit of Fol Blanche still made, and they're trying to kind of regenerate that. And there's some success now. But the reality is Fol Blanche got wiped out by the Phylloxera epidemic. So they grafted over in the mid-1880s to a very sturdy grape called the Ugni Blanc, also known as Saint Emilion. And that grape has done very, very well. Now, I've tasted some pre-Phylloxera cognacs, and I have to say the Fol Blanche was pretty marvelous. Very elegant. I don't want to use the word feminine because then that's anthropomorphizing, which I hate. But the cognacs to me were more delicate pre-Phylloxera. Now they're sturdy and they're much deeper, I think, than they probably were before that. And that's fine because I think really some of the greatest brandies, some of the greatest spirits in the world are coming out of cognac right now, without any doubt. Distillation is very, very clear because the cognacs are so orderly, and because they're a serious business. They don't mess around. All cognacs are distilled in the Charentaise still. Every cognac is distilled twice in a Charentaise still. Every cognac distilled twice in a pot still. There is no continuous distillation in cognac. The Charentaise still cannot be larger than 690 gallons. 690 gallons is not very big. Pot stills cannot be larger than 690 gallons, and they cannot, by law, distill to higher than 72% alcohol. Now, what does that mean? The lower the alcohol level, the more intense, the more deep the distillate. So this is good. Wood, of course, once the spirit comes out of the still at 67.5% alcohol, it needs to be put someplace. So it is put in Limousin or Trancé oak, and they can only be, and here again is I love this because they're so regulated, and it's good, I think, at the end of the day, 75 to 125 gallons, that's it. So that's the only type of barrel, it's the only size limit that they could have. 75 to 125 gallons, and that's it. It is very, very humid and very warm, very sultry in the summer, and they lose a lot of cognac to evaporation. They lose on average 2 to 3% per barrel per year to evaporation. Classifications of cognac, as in Armagnac and Calvados, are really based upon age, time in wood. The VS, which is very special, or around the world it's called 3 stars, means that that particular cognac had to have been in barrels for a minimum of 2 years. That's the youngest. VSOP, which is very superior old pale, not very special old pale, and the regulation on that is they must at least have spent 4 years in barrel. XO, Hors, which is HORS, and then second word D''AGE, Napoleon and extra, that's one category. That's essentially the XO category. XO means extra old. Those must be in barrel for at least 6 years. But the reality is, virtually all XOs that you will be pouring or enjoying for yourself in the marketplace are well over 6 years. So those are the basic minimums. 90%, over 90% of cognac is exported. The French drink